very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society.
You're in violation of secure communication procedures, Commodore.
So we just went ahead and fixed the glitch.
There is no America. There is no democracy.
Our fifth objective, a new world order.
There are no nations. There are no peoples. There are no Russians. There are no Arabs. There are no third worlds. There is no West.
Right-wing conspiracy.
What do you call it when the assassins accuse the assassin?
A new world order.
Thank you for plugging in to the Stones Unturned podcast.
Well, just a second there, Professor. We fixed the glitch.
I'm your host, Professor Thomas Henry Horan.
He reads everything.
Hello there, you lucky devils, and I do not use that term lightly. You are indeed plugged in live to the Stones Unturned podcast, and the professor does indeed read everything, including all signs in the heavens. I'll tell you what, after what I saw today, I think I'm just going to go ahead and just become a psychic. Did you see it? I saw the last one. I already told you over and over again. I've seen everything, and I had never seen anything like a total eclipse of the sun. You can look at it. The problem with, I don't have any coins. The problem with an annular eclipse is you can't look at it. You'll burn your eyes. That's when the moon is, a little bit further away from the Earth in its orbit. So the sun is a little bit bigger than the moon, so it doesn't quite block out the sun. So you can't look at it. You can't look at a partial eclipse. You can look at a total solar eclipse. And looking at it through a TV screen or looking at pictures is not the same thing. It is awesome. It is it's awe-inspiring. It's like, oh. So this time, the weather was, we had that high, hazy, just gauze, otherwise look like a clear blue sky, but just gets these little wisps of gauze. And so I keep telling people, look for the comet, look for the comet. Because you could see Venus, in the daytime, you're looking at Venus and you can see some stars. It's wild, it's wild. But because of this haze that we had this time, it looked a little more science fiction-y or something. If that was possible. But there's a shift in the clouds, and all of a sudden you could see the comet. It was right here, like this. Imagine this hole here, because the reason why I'm so worried, I'll explain in a minute. So, you have this black hole, and then you have this halo, which is not real thick with the naked eye, but is white. There's black sun with a white halo, not yellow, not orange, not off-white, white, like lightning white halo. So, is the sun black? Are we looking into a black hole? You can see the last time it seemed more obvious because once the cloud lifted, it was clear blue sky. And so you could tell that the moon is like this solid rock with mountains and things, right? And it's 250,000 miles away, but you feel like you could fly up there or drive, it'd take you about 9 months to drive there, but you could get there. It looked that weird. This was different. This looked more dreamy or a science fiction movie-ish. And then there must have been a shift in the clouds because suddenly there's this black hole right here, and there's this halo. It's not, very thin halo. And there was this red. And apparently right now, the moon came between not just the Earth and the sun, but between the Earth and then the comet was on the other side. The comet was on the other side of the moon, I guess, because all you could see is this tail, and it changes colors. I've seen it. This is the second time I saw it red. but it can be blue-green if you see it. Like, it's going to go away pretty soon. But I saw it at sunset once. It was orange and a red center. And today, it was the part of the tail you could see out when it left the glare was red. So it looked like there's this black hole or something, and like an arrow pierced it, and now blood was squirting out of it. So I'm standing there thinking, what are these loony toony Satanist process occult blah blah blahs? What are they going to make of this? I'm sure some of them saw it, and they're going to see pictures of it. You know, it's the black sun from mythology. You know, like Norse mythology, Aryan mythology is real big about the swastika is the black sun. This phenomenon that only a few human beings have ever seen. And now this time there was a comet? I wonder if that's happened before. Because total eclipses are rare, and total eclipses in clear weather are very rare. And it was just as red as blood. It was blood red. Like, it was pretty to me. But I was thinking, because, you know, like, this goes back to Parsifal. All this Aryan, pseudo-Aryan crap, like Parsifal. Blanchefleur, right? His lady love, Blanchefleur, with her white skin and her raven black hair and her blood red lips, right? Snow White. Snow White is Blanchefleur, okay? And there's a scene where there is a raven has been killed by a bobcat in a snowbank, and he stops to look at these black feathers in the white snow and the splash of red blood, and it reminds him of his Blanchefleur. Okay, the German fucking flag is red, black, and white, right? So I'm looking at this going, wow, this actually tops the last one. And two, which is impossible. And two, I thought, geez, you know, what are these loony birds, or what are they going to make of this? They've already been calling this the devil comet. They've already been, you know, because it looks like sometimes it's got horns, just as the solar wind blasts some of the material away from the comet, it makes this iridescent tail, which is very cool. But what are these? Because I'm telling you, that's what it looked like. It looked like the mythological black sun had been pierced by some arrow or something, or it was giving birth or something, like blood was spurting out of the black sun. Because as the clouds shifted, the comet part came and went. Whereas because it's a ring of white. You feel like you could paint it until you try to paint it, and you can't. I've seen sundogs. I've seen things people wouldn't believe. I've seen ghosts. I've never seen anything. Partial eclipses, you can't see it. If it's a really close one, or like right before, or like the diamond ring, like it looks funny, but you still can't look at it because it's so bright. That very first ray of light, you see a brief flash of the rainbow, because the moon is actually made of very beautiful rocks. It's made out of diamonds. And you see this flash, and then it's so bright already, you have to turn away, and you need to turn away. You can't even stare at the diamond ring. But all of that at one time, obviously it's an awe-inspiring sight. And then to see this comet, and then to think, wow, what a privilege. You know, what a blessing. What a gift to see this. For a guy who should have been dead 10 years ago, I got to see 2 total eclipses of the sun. And there are scientists who have never gotten to see one. NASA have been in town with their noses in a joint. Because this was the totality of the totality. It was pretty cool. I was around a few more people this time. Last time, yeah, it was me and my neighbor, like the next building, and we, like, our decks kind of touched at different levels. So his mom was there. Well, he went off with his friends and didn't get to see it. They were at a spot where the cloud didn't move, and we were in a spot where the cloud... I showed you that video, right? It's a selfie video of me and the cloud, and I'm about to make a joke, and the curtain rises. Like, you can see the curtain rise, and there it is. It's total. It's totality. And blah, there it is. I managed to get some pictures and stare at it for a second. This one lasted over 4 minutes. Yeah, it was pretty cool. Pictures from these phones didn't. The phones are too sensitive. You couldn't see. They couldn't darken down enough to get a picture of the. And I did not drag out my old 35 millimeter this time because I figured, well, total eclipses tend to look alike. There's a ring of white. There's a white halo with a very crisp black dot cut out of the center. They all look alike. All the pictures of eclipses look alike. And I got one the last time. So this time I wanted to look for the comet. Where's the comet? It was right there. Like where I was watching it, it looked like something had pierced the halo into the black sun, and now blood was gushing out. Or you could say it's the red-horned devil is impregnating the black egg, or whatever. I mean, you can see why people create religions and these eclipses have changed the course of history many times. And you kind of get it. If you're standing there in the world, and it was a beautiful day today, you're standing there looking at it. What are the Looney Tunes crowd going to make of this? What are they going to be inspired to do exactly? Diddy just got busted. And you heard him in the very first video, Big Papa, with Biggie. He says, "My man Baphomet." Like he says, Biatch, Baphomet. My man Baphomet. And Beyonce is notorious for worshiping Baphomet. I mean, now he's just gone down. See, here's the thing. Of course, the total eclipse had been predicted over 200 years ago. I think they were only off by like a second or two. I mean, they really had it nailed down. But not the comet. And there was a lot of doubt as to whether the comet would be at all visible during the totality. Well, let me tell you, I've never seen anything like it. And I've seen a total eclipse of the sun. I saw the Bangles. I was sitting so close to the Bangles, I could smell their underarm deodorant. What are these cuckoo birds going to do as a result of this? I keep looking online to see. The other point I'm going to make tonight is the next episode is not quite ready yet. I know it's already Monday. But comparing Sandy Hoax, Columbine, and Manson, okay? And how that proves I'm right again. So I got my sign from heaven. What does it mean? Does anybody know anything about astrology? It's palmistry or nothing for me. Good fortune tellers are like good therapists or good detectives. They can take one look at you and tell you your life story. They know what's wrong because it's always the same thing, right? It's very easy to guess. But some of them are actually, they have the talents to be great therapists. And I think I've investigated as a journalist a couple of phony psychics, who were really exploiting people. You pay, what's a going rate? $50, $100 for a reading once a month. If it helps you make up your mind about how hard and how often to beat your kids or whatever it is you need advice on, I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with that. But when you're taking taking them for 50 grand, 100 grand, because you can contact their dead relatives in the beyond and all this other horse shit, this is where I have been interested. So, what are these nutballs? It doesn't matter whether this means anything or not. It's hard to look at it and say, well, this is just whatever. Another miracle, ho-hum. Well, it couldn't possibly mean anything. Only a fool would think it would mean something, but there are a lot of fools out there who do think it means something. This has to be, I don't know much about it. I don't know, all I know is it was very influential and still is. Look at the Republicans from Hoover to Reagan, right? Their wives dominated by these fortune tellers, like Rasputin. Okay, it doesn't matter whether there's anything to the hocus pocus. If people think there's something to it, and important people think there's something to it, are these people going to feel empowered? Are they going to feel threatened? Are they going to feel like their life is complete and they can chill from now on? One of their princes of darkness, Diddy, Genghis Khan, Attila the Hun, Hitler, Stalin, and Diddy. Sean Combs. Well, mo money, mo problems. And remember who his father was. His father was a hitman for Frank Lucas and was bumped off by Frank Lucas. It's all part of this deal, getting this heroin coming out of Southeast Asia after Tony Poe had made a big stink about the whole thing. And there's a big shuffle, and the next thing you know, it's Ike Atkinson, and he's got this cousin back in Harlem with the hookup, and they create this $1 million a week market for heroin in New York City, and then the CIA literally come muscling in on it, the Nugan Bank crowd, the Son of Sam crowd, and Diddy Daddy did dirty deeds, dirt cheap for Frank Lucas, and was bumped off by Frank Lucas. The same way John Carr was probably bumped off by Frank Lucas. For revenge. Not to say that I can prove that John Carr was the one who ratted them out. What I'm saying is, if I were Frank and Ike, the first guy I would think of would be Technical Sergeant John Carr. That must be the asshole right there. And they certainly seem to believe it, because there's all these people saying that there was somebody after John, that John wasn't just being paranoid. There were people after him. What was my point? My point is this. What are these dingleberries going to think of this? Because if it impressed me, soft, impressionable minds are going to go ape shit. What are they going to do? So be alert. The message for the buckaroos this week is be alert. Keep your eyes open for a satanic panic. There's no way they anticipated this. Like, they would know that there were going to be these back-to-back eclipses and crap, and the Druids are here in force having their heyday. But I don't know. Recently, this comet is periodic, but it wasn't even in the news till a couple months ago. So they had no way of knowing it was going to be red, blood red, like blood red. Mars is orange. This was blood red. This was red, and it was like it was neon red because it's lit up by the sun, and then with the moon blocking the glare, you could see the comet because it's lined up between us and the sun, and the moon is just all lined up at one time. This has to mean something in the mysterious triangle of Iclon. I just don't know what it is. Does anybody know what it is? Because the last comet, last winter, that green comet that looked like it came shooting out of Draco the dragon, and it went flying past Mars. I've got a really cool picture. I got to get those pictures uploaded so I can show them, of this green comet and orange Mars. And Mars was really bright last year. We were very close to Mars, or lined up with Mars. So that was really cool. This green comet came flying out of Draco. This is a blood red comet. Well, sometimes it's green and sometimes it is red. It's the Christmas comet. Today was blood red. Today the sun went down in the middle of the sky and came up again in the middle of the sky. Are you with me? Today we stepped through the looking glass world. You get it. When you're there and it's happening, you fucking get it. It's an awe-inspiring experience. The birds and the animals get it. But you look around at the horizon, and the horizon's lit up. You are under a dome. You're under a dome of silence, a dome of darkness. And this one was cool because Venus was just clear as a bell. You don't see Venus in the middle of the day. And there was this comet and this black sun that everybody makes such a brouhaha about down through history. Well, this is not a premium only stream, but I want to run through. Maybe I'll do this tomorrow because there are a couple more slides I'd like to make. I just wanted everybody to know, keep your eyes open. Were the red heifers sacrificed today? Maybe. Hi, Medley. Hi, Nathan. Hi, Lisa. Hi, Channel. Channel's bewildered. Hi, John. Hi, Scott. If you guys are here, I'll just show you what I got so far. Let me show you some slides I got put together so far. Because I've been putting off talking about this cult that this blob runs on. And today is as good a day as any to just throw some background at you, okay? So maybe I'll just go ahead and do that. See, and I owe the Lucky Devils an episode anyway. It's been nothing but pre-games lately, so. But that's because we're talking about things that are a little too ticklish for the tubes. This is a little too ticklish for Channel, but he's been through worse. How Gnostic is Christianity? I have argued and will argue, but not tonight necessarily, that Gnosticism did not evolve out of Christianity. First of all, this whole story about the history of Christianity is not just oversimplified, but ridiculous. Christianity evolved over quite a long period of time. We know it goes back at least as far as a guy named Simon, the son of Jesus, there's this Jesus who comes from, and he might be the Black Jesus, and he comes as an apostolos of the Alexandria temple, or what was the temple in Eritrea? This is the most advanced. These are these Hellenized Jews. This is their Los Alamos of the Hellenized world, the world's greatest intellectuals. And they'd adopted a form of Judaism, a mild form of Judaism. And we're going to talk in a minute about one of these guys who had heard of the Jewish prophets as well as the Jewish, that God had written the law down on stone with his own finger, kind of appealed to their need to justify monotheism and what's the real source of the law and what is the source of the truth, and that these prophets had gotten the truth directly from the God, the one God, and that Logos had come directly through them. That appealed to them and then politically became very useful. So when they pushed the Persians back, and this wasn't so much Greeks versus the Persians as it was kind of a Persian Empire civil war. This is kind of like a preview of Rome's civil wars further west in Europe. The Greeks had been pretty Persified. They have a hero of their own named Perseus, right, who's obviously a Persian. So they'd been acculturated to a great extent. This was more of a civil war. But I'll talk more about that later. But so you have these Sadducees, these Hellenized Jews, more liberal, modern, if I dare say, Jews, right, who see animal sacrifice as a primitive superstition, who see the obsession with some of these dietary and hygiene laws like this. There's a lot of, it's more symbolic. This has already been evolving, and there's this guy who comes out of Egypt and probably Ethiopia. Probably, there's a very high probability he was black. And his name is Jesus, right, the Greek name, and he's an apostolos from these Hellenized university to go to Jerusalem and go into Syria and some of these big synagogues and try to initiate this change in the overall curriculum to push out the Persian influence in Judaism in the Middle East and substitute a more westernized version through this apostolos, this not just a messenger, he's an agent. Because at that time, the temple in Alexandria was the biggest and most powerful of the Jewish temples. Okay? I only bring that up because I am telling you things like the Lord's Prayer. There's a whole bunch of material from the Gospels that predates the Gospels by over 200 years. This guy's grandson had written down the teachings of blah, 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 blah. Ben Sirach, Jesus ben Sirach, or Jesus, son of Simon, son of Sirach, something like that. And these were the teachings his grandfather had brought from Egypt into Jerusalem. Because Jerusalem is this cultural battleground. It's a culture war. Economically, it's not worth a lot, but strategically, it is priceless. And it's also, there's a culture war. Because no superpower can let the other superpower have direct control. It's kind of like post-war Berlin. There are factions, and it's supposed to be an open city, but there's a culture war going on. And this guy's part of that culture war. And Josephus calls these people the Sadducees, as opposed to the Pharisees, who were more like we would think of Orthodox Jews today. But they still practice blood sacrifice. This is very important. The Jews still practice blood sacrifice. But these Hellenized Jews, these Sadducees, whatever you want to call them, proto-Christians, and their Messiah is this cat named Jesus. Etc., 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 okay? I'm not saying that, I'm not talking about the one true faith. I'm not talking about any of that. What I'm really talking about is you have Gnostic influences in this world before there's even the supposed Jesus lives. It has already begun. I will secondly point out that an awful lot of the official New Testament, the canonical New Testament, is Gnostic. They snuck a lot in there. They kept a lot in there. And I think it's because they were in there from day one. They saw this opportunity and they infiltrated it as quickly as they could. But they'd been around for a long time. They had been around for a long time, and they simply infiltrate Christianity. And they really do this in the 2nd century. From 100 to 200 AD is when the Gnostics have really not just piggybacked on this Christian movement, but there's this guy, right? Christianity is based on this idea that a man resurrected himself from the dead. And this idea that the one true God sacrificed, this is not a human sacrifice, this is a divine sacrifice. Or is it a human sacrifice? Right? It reads as though it's and this is debated. This is debated to this day. What is Jesus' actual nature? He's the perfect man. He is the one man who has fulfilled God's law. Somehow, no one else is able to do this. And therefore, his blood sacrifice redeems the sins of all mankind for all time. Conditions apply, but... And another way of... And then he's God. God come down to earth in human form. God begets himself as a son. This is exactly like Isis and Osiris and Horus and blah, 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 blah. God who sacrificed himself to himself. Because if Jesus is God and he sacrifices himself, what God is he sacrificing himself to? He's sacrificing himself to God, who he is, so therefore he's sacrificing himself to himself, like Odin. Odin sacrifices himself to himself and discovers the mystery of the runes. These are related mythologies. How much of this is true Christianity, I could not possibly care less. What I care about is the people who think it is, or the people who to this day say there are secret teachings of Jesus, there are secret teachings of Paul. They really one of them almost becomes Pope. But this is a very Gnostic thing. If Jesus is God and God raised Jesus from the dead, then Jesus raised himself from the dead. But he lived life as a man and he bled like a man. He ate like a man. And he raised himself up from the dead. Right? Not that this is the true Christianity, but there is this room for making these arguments based on the scriptures that are canonical. And how did they get to be the canon? And how did all this Gnosticism slip into the Holy Catholic Church? How did this happen? That's what I study. That's not what the subject of... I'm just going to give you a little bit of this background, because there are people today who still believe in Gnostic Christianity. And they believe that they are becoming gods, and that they are creating gods. And that things like these... Like today, this total solar eclipse, I happened to have this blood red comet that looked like the black sun was squirting out blood, or perhaps giving birth. Blood is associated with birth as well as death. Your fear of death triggers a sense of nausea and panic and asphyxiation. That was what you felt the minutes before you decided to get the hell out of the womb. That was the first time you'd ever felt your fear of death. So when you get close to death, what you're feeling the fear of is you're not fearing dying. What you're fearing is a post-traumatic memory of the day you were born. That's all. But there are people who think they can raise themselves from the dead and become a god. Even in ancient Egypt, the magic of the priests directing the energy from the gods would resurrect the dead king. But then he had to study and do his lessons to make himself into, he's born again, but then he has to learn how to be a god. And this is based a lot on what he had learned when he had been king. And the priests know, they have the instructions for how to become a god. So a lot of that stuff, those magic rituals, those mysteries, those are not done by the king in life, because he escaped from the power of the priests. To keep him under control, he will not be shown the book of the dead until after he's dead. And if he's worthy of resurrection, and the priests resurrect him, if the priests decide to resurrect him, then he will get the final instructions he needs to finish becoming a god. And then his value as a god, his rank and his power, because all the stars, all the gods are his ancestors. So he's going to be with his ancestors. And he needs the help of the priests. Not only the lessons he learns and the things he achieves in life, but also he needs the help of the priests. And then the priests go on the black market and they sell this secret of the Book of the Dead. And they go into the tombs of the rich and the powerful, and they copy out the Book of the Dead. And the craftspeople who make the tombs for the kings, you pay them under the table, they come out and they build you a resurrection machine of your own. Then the people hear about this, and over time this becomes democratized. Any faithful servant of the king, a god in making, will have the opportunity for an afterlife as well. This slowly becomes just like Christianity. This has a lot to do with this resurrection and sacrifice cycle between Isis, Horus, and Osiris, with which these Looney Tunes are intimately familiar. But they infiltrated Christianity before there was even the word Christ in Christianity. That's my point. I could be wrong. I'm just saying that's okay. The very first images that appear to have anything to do with a crucifixion religion, a crucified God, there are two. One in plaster and one in one of those gemstones with the little image carved on it. And it is the God has the body of a man and the head of an ass. It is Set. The oldest depictions of the crucifixion of Christ, he has the head of an ass. This doesn't mean that these were true Christians, but it means that Gnostics were right there in the very beginning of Christianity. And we know that Constantine sent out an order that all these major religions need to sit down and get on the same page with each other and create one universal state religion. Now, it takes a long time. It's not until Theodosius, right? They have to sit down and they have to hammer out their common, this is a coalition government. This is a coalition religion. And the Christians seems to have been, they take over, but the Gnostics are already there. Constantine was a Gnostic. Constantine had a bull sacrificed to him, and that made him a god. That's that cult of Mithras. Your devoted followers, your disciples, sacrifice a bull to you. It's not the blood baptism of Christ, the blood of Christ that washes away your sins against God. It is the blood of the sacred bull gives you the energy, just like they sacrifice it to any other god is where they get their energy from. The last ritual of you becoming a god is you go underneath the thing and they sacrifice the bull and the blood comes down. And what's important about that, it's a chthonic. There's Cthulhu and chthonic. 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 I'll show you in a minute. The crucifixion, the blood spills on the ground. It is not burned in a fire and carried up to the Oranos. It is not an Oronic. It's chthonic, not Oronic. When you burn the fat and the blood, it goes up, it rises to the sky god. Blood that is spilled on the ground goes into the ground and strengthens those gods in the ground. In the Odyssey, Odysseus goes into the underworld and he takes blood and he uses it to lure the spirits of his ancestors out of their rest so he can ask them, and his dead friends, so he can ask them questions. This graffito says, Alexamenos, worship your god. So this might be a satirical image. But people are connecting this crucifixion of Christ with the cult of Set. Set is the brother of Osiris, who murders him, the way Abel murders Cain. But over a slightly different motive. But there's still jealousy. So he murders him. And Isis tries to resurrect her dead husband, but she can't find his Winkus. And so she makes one out of gold. And she uses that to impregnate herself with their son. So we know that the Egyptians are the first culture to discover that it's not the physical motion of sex which causes pregnancy. It is the semen. The man's semen is the magic ingredient. The sugar on top, if you will, that initiates this miraculous process. They figured that out. So in this myth of Isis, she doesn't need to have sex with her husband to get pregnant. It's almost like a virgin conception. I'm not trying to prove that that's what Christianity is all about. What I'm saying is these Gnostics already have these myths for a long time, over 1,000 years, and some of these myths have been around since before 1000 BC. So when they're looking at Christianity, they're saying, "Oh, this sounds familiar. You mean blah, blah, blah. You mean this and that." So they're in it from the very beginning. Now, the so-called Orthodox Christians, they think they win. They think they eventually drive all the Gnostics out of the ecclesia, but they are fooling themselves. They really never got rid of them, and they didn't get rid of all of their books, as I shall show you in a moment. The Mycenaeans worshipped donkeys as gods. See, there's like, and see, you can read the Gospels and you see things like Jesus says, "He who would be first must be last. He who would be the master of one must first be the servant of all." Well, in the ancient world, that's the donkey. The donkey was the most useful thing in the world. It was all transportation, all horsepower, very few people had horses. The donkey was the beast of burden and mechanical power. And, even, it was almost like a car is in America. If you don't have one, you're deprived. The donkey was the servant of all. And the story, his symbolic, he rides into Jerusalem on an ass and blah, 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 blah. So these Gnostics have a point. But I have argued that the reason they have a point is because they're the ones who got a lot of their material snuck into the Bible past the censors who were trying desperately to keep it out. And then there's, the golden ass, the Metamorphoses. This novel. It's this Gnostic novel. Okay, and it's satirical. But they infiltrated Christianity very early on. And one of the ways they did this, there is a point. I'll save this point for later. Just remember Typhon or Typhon. This is a god worshipped in a minor god, a serpent god, worshipped. Typhon and Python are probably, in the ancient world, went from right to left, and then eventually changed from left to right, first the Greeks and then the Romans. So sometimes a name like Typhon would be written backwards, it'd come out Python or whatever. It's one of the big snake gods near Delphi, and this cult spread to Asia Minor, the west coast of Turkey. Byblos in Lebanon, right? So you have these Greek cities, and you have these Phoenician who take over what's left of the Minoan culture. So you have their cities, Byblos, and then you have Tyre and Sidon, and you have this mix of cities all up and down the west coast of Asia Minor. So Plutarch was born there. Plutarch was born in Was he born in Byblos? He tells the story. He takes the story of Isis, Osiris, Set, and Horus, and there is a cult at Byblos of this religion. But at Byblos, Set is called Typhon. Remember that for later. Okay, this is the thing I just wanted to make clear. At Byblos, Set, who is... He's supposed to be the ass-eared god, but he becomes the snake god. And so is Leviathan. Leviathan is the axis of the earth that the earth spins on. Okay, it's a sexual... Okay, Leviathan is the father and Gaia is the mother, and okay, that's Leviathan. So there are these serpent gods. Moses is a priest of a serpent god, and some people have said Set. And it's interesting how Moses is actually treated by actual Jewish kings, etc., etc., etc. We'll come back to that later. But what you need to know right now, and why you need to keep an eye on your satanic cannibal neighbors, not to mention Manny, is what I saw today. If they saw that, they are going to go bananas. But just remember some of these historical facts about how these ideas develop. Okay, in Byblos. Now, in Byblos, now get a load of this. So when, according to the story, the way it was told in Byblos, when Set, or Typhon, had murdered his brother, Osiris, he locked him up in a coffin. And there's a weird version of the story where he builds a coffin, and then they play a drinking game with their buddies, and whoever fits the coffin wins a prize or something, and the coffin fits Osiris, and his brother slams the lid shut, nails it shut, and he dumps it. And he dumps it in the ocean. And it washes to a shore at where Byblos, the city of Byblos, will be founded. And it grows, a tree grows up around this chest, this coffin that has Osiris in it. A tree grows up around it. And king of Byblos, I don't remember which one, he had the tree cut down, made into a pillar. Those stone columns of those Greek temples, they used to be wood. So he had this tree cut down and made into a pillar of his palace without knowing what was in it. And Isis, who's looking for her husband's body to resurrect, finally tracks it down. It's inside this pillar. So she takes the chest out of the tree but leaves the tree so it can be worshipped by the people of Byblos. And she takes the chest back home and she resurrects her dead husband, and she makes a penis out of gold and uses it to impregnate herself with their son, who grows up to marry her. And they have a son. And this is the death and rebirth cycle that goes way back in Egyptian history, and it evolves over time. Plutarch was initiated into the mysteries of Apollo, and in ancient art, some of the first artistic depictions of Jesus as alive in his ministry, he is Apollo performing some miracles of Jesus. And remember, Apollo in the ancient world is not just transgender, he's really transsexual. He's both. He's hermaphrodite, he's whatever. And he's also the god of healing. May have been probably initiated into the Eleusinian mysteries. Plutarch, I think he became in charge of the oracle at Delphi. Okay, that's what these people study this stuff religiously. They think it's all true. They think it's the key. They think they aren't going to die. That's the problem. So here's Byblos and Tyre. Byblos, Tyre, Sidon is down here somewhere, and down here is Jerusalem, okay? And they will also bring up that, first of all, David was not an Israelite, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, Typhon was a monstrous serpentine giant. Well, it's one of the giants. Typhon was the son of Gaia and Tartarus. Typhon attempted to overthrow Zeus for the supremacy of the cosmos. The two fought a cataclysmic battle which Zeus finally won with the aid of his thunderbolts. Defeated, Typhon was cast into Tartarus, or Hell, the underworld, or buried beneath Mount Etna. Hell was located under Mount Etna. Mount Etna is a volcano. Or in later accounts, the island of Ischia. So under Mount Etna, Typhon mythology is part of the Greek succession myth. Okay, so Typhon goes to war with Zeus. Typhon and his army go to war with Zeus. Zeus defeats him with the thunderbolts, and he casts him down into Tartarus, which is the underworld. Does this story sound familiar? They make a big deal out of that parallel. And really, it's barely mentioned at all in the Apocalypse of John, which isn't a Christian book in the slightest sense. It was around a long time before. Okay? He mentions it briefly, but John Milton really goes to town on it. Now, Marcus Aurelius and Justin Martyr, right, there's this guy Justin Martyr. Before I get to Valentinian, there's this guy Justin Martyr. The reason you ever heard of Christianity is not Paul, not Peter, not Jesus. The reason you ever heard of Christianity is Justin Martyr. Justin Martyr was the one, he was trained as a Stoic philosopher. That was pretty much the ruling party, the ruling ecclesia of the Roman Empire during the 5 good emperors. That's pretty much Stoicism. And Marcus Aurelius is one of their greatest. Marcus Aurelius was like Stalin. Marcus Aurelius was like a successful Hitler. No, I beg your pardon. The Stoic opposition to the Roman state, which was dominated by, not hedonists, they were accused of being hedonists. Epicureans, blah, 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 blah. And the old pagan cult, which politically supported the ruling class of Rome, was the farmer cult, the pagan cult. They had to be priests of the blood sacrifice going on in temples that educated people were starting to feel uncomfortable about. And in fact, in the book of Isaiah, book of Isaiah, God says, I've had enough blood sacrifice. It's not doing it. You need to redeem yourself some other way. Blood sacrifice, I'm full of blood sacrifice. So one of the things, Justin Martyr, this is very important because very important for so many reasons. Justin Martyr studied to be, he's the one who studied to be a Stoic philosopher, and then he was told about the prophets, these prophets, and they got the truth directly from God. I think it's Justin Martyr. And the thing about Justin Martyr is he's the one who he justifies Gnosticism. Yeah, don't worry about the blood sacrifice of Jesus or how it's misinterpreted by people. Don't worry about this stuff. We'll talk about this later. Oh, let me mention this really quickly. Because of the Diddy thing, and because of the Beyonce thing, and because of this, all this stuff coming up, bear this in mind. Moloch, right? This cult that we're talking about, they've been accused of worshiping Moloch and sacrificing their children and other people's children to Moloch. Remember this. Technically, Moloch is not a god. It's more important than a god. In the book of Leviticus, and the only copies we have of this are the Greek translations. We don't have any original Hebrew versions of any of these books. These are the Greek translations, and they are highly colored, as Channel will be pleased to tell you. The Septuagint is something of a fraud. It's this attempt to Hellenize Jewish culture and Jewish law. And this Jesus of Alexandria, this Jesus of Ethiopia, who could have been the black Jesus, the one who writes the Lord's Prayer, and it's not the Beatitudes in particular. A lot of the Jesus material is actually plagiarized from this book. It's their version of the Old Testament that has survived today. But according to their version of Leviticus, God says, say to the people of Lord Ishirah, any one of the people of Ishirah or of the strangers who sojourn in Ishirah, who gives any of his children to Moloch shall surely be put to death. This has been interpreted as the name of a god. It is not the name of a god. It is a Phoenician word. It is the Phoenician word for sacrifice or offering or gift to God. So anyone who sacrifices their child offers their child to me as a sacrifice, that's forbidden. And you have this parallel story about Abraham, who's going to sacrifice his son Isaac, and God stops him and sends a ram to be sacrificed instead, putting a stop to human sacrifice. And Abraham is going to sacrifice his only begotten son, remember? But God stops him. So for true Christianity, I think it's fair to say there's been one sacrifice, and there's been one. Christ was already God before he was resurrected. When we, the rest of us good Christians, are resurrected, we're not going to be God. We're just going to be resurrected Christians or whatever. We're not going to be God. Gnosticism is this belief that man can become God through these rituals of enlightenment, and you reenact, and it's very magical. I haven't brought this up. It's very magical. And the Gnostics harp on the magical aspects of Christianity. The communion meal, like this, the transformation of the bread into my body and the wine into my blood. They really harp on this stuff. They don't see it necessarily as just allegorical. They see it as actual magic spells with actual power behind them. Then again in Deuteronomy, there shall not be found among you anyone who burns his son or his daughter as an offering, anyone who practices divination or tells fortunes or interprets omens, or any sorcerers. The problem is the book of Leviticus was written according to divination, the casting of lots. The selection, there are 2 goats sacrificed on Yom Kippur, which is the only day of the year when even the high priest is allowed to enter the Holy of Holies, only once a year, to atone for the national sins. There are 2 goats. One will be sacrificed on the fire as an offering to Yahweh for atonement, and the other, all of the sins of the community will be placed on this scapegoat, and he will be driven into the wilderness. This is a custom they apparently picked up from when they moved into the region. We know it goes back to the city of Ebla, at least as far back as for over 4,000 years. It's around Ebla and on up into Byblos and on up into the regions where the people of Abraham, supposedly Abraham, settled, coming from the east and settling in the west, where they agreed to perform this ritual as one of the conditions. And actually, according to Moses, according to Deuteronomy, Moses tells the Hebrews that your contract to occupy this land is contingent upon you observing and enforcing these laws in this book. Why am I bringing any of this up? These people really get into this stuff, and this is their reasoning. I'm telling you a lot of their reasoning about this. Well, one of the things about Justin Martyr is that, or is it Valentinian? Justin Martyr was the one. Let me just say this really quickly. Sometimes when we read Paul, it sounds like Paul thinks his martyrdom is that's his opportunity to achieve Christ status. That Christ, he talks about the mantle of Christ, he talks about putting on Christ, that Christhood is sort of a state or status that a martyr can achieve, and it's temporary, like maybe 40 days. That Stephen had been adorned with the mantle of Christ at the moment of his martyrdom, and that he was Christ for 40 days while Paul was recovering from his blindness and whatnot. And that it's not crystal clear, and that's what I think is interesting. What does Paul really think? And Paul is eagerly looking forward to his martyrdom. But it's Justin Martyr who turns martyrdom into what the Catholic Church wants martyrdom to be understood as today. Martyrdom is not blood sacrifice. Martyrdom doesn't redeem anybody's sins, including those of the martyr. Martyrdom is only a testimony to the strength that one can get from their faith in Christ. It's a testimony to the truth of the Gospels. It is not a sacrifice that pays anybody's sins. This is the official Catholic doctrine as I understand it. Christ's sacrifice was a sacrifice that would atone for the sins of all mankind. Terms and conditions apply, but that's the point. And it's only once, and it only needed to happen once, and it happened, and it's done. Martyrdom, it's not easy to tell when Paul talks about his impending martyrdom and what the martyrdom of Stephen meant. It's not easy to tell. He may have thought that Jesus was just one more in a line of many will be called, few will be chosen. And the final test is, can you endure the torture and the pain of death without losing your faith? And if so, then you might end up bearing the mantle of Christ for 40 days or whatever. I can't prove that, but I can't disprove it either. Justin Martyr, the story about Justin Martyr makes it clear. These people, and what they're martyred over is they are commanded by the local sheriff, like what the hell was his name, procurator, the local sheriff. They must perform blood sacrifice in the Jewish temple, and they must do it in honor of the genius of the emperor. And he doesn't say they have to sacrifice in a pagan temple. And I'm pretty sure he doesn't order them to sacrifice in a pagan temple, but he requires them to make all peoples all over the Roman Empire. You had to make one sacrifice a year. You could sacrifice whatever, your religion was your religion, but you had to sacrifice, you had to ask your God to save the emperor. You know, God save the emperor. You had to do that. So he's demanding that these Christians in this community, is this at Lyon? Yeah, that's right. Justin Martyr was martyred at Lyon, right? I'm sorry, I keep getting into the trivia. But Justin Martyr's the one, that's not a sacrifice. And your martyrdom doesn't mean you become Christ. There's no doubt about that. It's just that you have, what have you become? Because there's a cult of martyrs these first couple hundred years. It's all about enduring the torture and the slow, horrible death. And it wins them a lot of converts. There's the story of is it in Lyon? There's this persecution in Lyon, and there's an old lady they drag out, and they beat her, and they break her bones, and this goes on for a few days, and she doesn't die. And the crowd starts to, at first they're into it. And they, according to the story, the crowd starts to turn against this. And a lot of people are converted because they see that the strength that people seem to derive from this faith. But the Gnostics will tell you that these people became gods. That's my point. It's Justin Martyr. It's Justin Martyr. Isn't it Justin Martyr who... He's trained as a Western philosopher, and then he uses Christian scriptures to show that Christianity is actually not an alien religion, and it is compatible. He's like one of the first, because Valentinian is the one who uses the canonical Christian scriptures to justify Gnosticism. That's what makes Valentinian so dangerous. Oh, and don't forget, during the reign of David, the Tyrians, and from Tyre and Byblos, Hiram Abiff, the architect, is from Byblos. We'll come back to that later. So Moloch was not a god. Moloch was, don't use your children as a divine offering to me, is what he's saying. He's not saying don't sacrifice your children to that alien god. He's saying don't sacrifice your children to me, which he tells Abram very specifically, don't sacrifice your son to me, sacrifice that ram. But Valentinian claimed to be a disciple of Theudas, and Theudas claimed to be a disciple of Paul. Valentinius said that Theudas imparted to him the secret wisdom that Paul had taught privately to his inner circle, which Paul publicly referred to in connection with his visionary encounter with the risen Christ. Right? Let me just reiterate my point maybe a little bit more clearly. Reading Paul in Greek kind of makes it sound like it was Stephen who became Christ for his turn, for his 40 days or whatever. Stephen, the mantle of Christ had descended on Stephen, and this was the Christ that Paul met on the road to Damascus. Paul never once mentions the word Jesus. I think the one time he mentions the name Jesus, people think that that's somebody stuck that in there. He never mentions Jesus, and he never refers to the Gospels, and he never talks about anything Jesus ever did. All he talks about is Christ, and how Christ has appeared and suffered. And so, and there's an important part of this story I don't have the slides ready for, which is that this idea of the apostles and the apostolic succession, they are prophets. They are latter-day prophets. That the apostoloi are the prophets, and the Holy Spirit of truth sometimes, reveals the truth through these new prophets. And so it's possible to read a lot of Paul's material. He thinks he's going to go through the same experience that Jesus and Stephen did, and perhaps he will be worthy he will bear the mantle of Christ for the 40 days or whatever, until it's somebody else's turn. But the story of Justin Martyr makes it clear that's not what's happening with the martyrdoms. The martyrdoms are just it's just a testimony to their faith. And it was very persuasive. But the Gnostics will tell you they became gods. Or at least some of them became gods. Such esoteric teachings were downplayed in Rome after 160, 170, right? They tried to push out the Gnostics. But I'm telling you, Gnosticism wasn't something that suddenly appeared, a week before all of that. Gnosticism was something that infiltrated Christianity even before it was called Christianity. That's what I'm saying. And they're still there, and they're still trying to justify what they do. And they're going to look at this thing today and try to justify because they can. And the reason they can is because they got a lot of their material squeezed into the Bible where it didn't belong, where it wasn't wanted. But one problem was Constantine himself was a Gnostic who thought he had become a god, and his followers thought so. So the thing about Valentinian is he not only uses the canonical scriptures to justify his Gnosticism, or try to, I'm not saying he succeeds, But he mentions a pairing. These are pairs. These are pairs of these archangels, or whatever you want to call them. He calls them eons. We use eon to refer to a span of time. An eon in his time meant to, they're immaterial, they're hypostatic ideas, but they marry and they have children, like the chemical marriage of Christian Rosie Cross. Not that any of this stuff is real, but there are people who believe it's real, and they've preserved these books, and they've preserved these traditions, and they've evolved over time. So one of these pairings is theletos, the will, or what is willed, and Sophia, wisdom, feminine. This is one of their, so this is where, they can justify Thelema and all this other crap. I just wanted to give you a brief rundown of what they can point to the Bible and say, Jesus talks about their secret teachings that are not for everyone. It is argued that those teachings are then revealed within the text. There are no but these people come to you and say, hey, you want to know the secret teachings of Jesus and you don't have to die. There was one, somebody help me out. It wasn't Kelly Clarkson, I don't think. But one of these, she was female, she was either very light-skinned or white, who said they offered her a deal that she didn't take. She's another one of these people. And this was a clip from an interview a few years ago where she said, they told me I wouldn't die. They told me I would never die. They told me I would have all this money. They told me I would have... And I can't find that clip. I thought I saved it to my Facebook feed and I didn't. There's some, and I think she's talking about that Bad Boy Record crowd, that machine, that chaos operation. I'm telling you, as we shall very soon see, Diddy was a successful Charles Manson. Who was that person? Do you know who I'm talking about? Because she said very specifically, they promised me I would never die. They promised me I would have all this money. They promised me I would have this, that, and the other. Yeah. I think they're going to go kukalabanza after what happened today. So keep our eyes open to see. And then is there a spike in the number of post offices blowing up? Is there a... Is this going to help RFK Jr. or hurt RFK Jr.? Keep your eyes open. Thank you very much. Oh, let me take a look at the chat. I could be polite. People still watching? The red heifer sacrifice today. So I'm not trying to disprove anybody's religion or prove anybody's religion. I'm showing you what these assholes will point to, the kind of stuff they point to and the kind of stuff they believe. And I can see where the intelligent people would be fooled by this. Remember, smart people are the easiest people to fool. And it all comes down to one thing. It is one thing. And I thought it was interesting that this girl said something about it. They promised her she would never die. Now you could say, look at Elvis. Elvis will never die. Marilyn Monroe will never die. And there were people involved in creating those stars and creating those materials who were looking at it that way. Even without being, necessarily cultists themselves. In a way, these people will never die. But I think there was more to it. I think Diddy and them were promising people and maybe believed it themselves. I think Beyonce thinks that she's a Gnostic. I think she's been taken in by this cult. And it's interesting that the music industry was bleeding over into both Manson and Son of Sam. And in Son of Sam, you very definitely have Baphomet, right? Etc. So if anybody can think of that and you can find that clip, oh my goodness. Just because she says it. They promised me I would never die. And I think that's what's really... And one more thing we'll come back to is who was handling Diddy's money? I mean, he had the island right next to Lolita Island, right? Wasn't it the next island over? All right. Thank you all so much. Good night. God bless. Please say your prayers. And please spay and neuter your cannibals. And I'll see you, this is Monday, right? Give me till Wednesday, and I'll try to have an episode tying Columbine, Sandy Hoax, and Manson, the first episode tying all that stuff together. Because I know we all want to get back to Manson. Speaking of blood red comments, we all want to get back to Manson. I'm Professor Thomas Henry Horan, asking you to please stay plugged in to the Stones Unturned podcast.
He reads